Understanding Judaism and Zionism, thanks to Israel Shahak's book, Jewish History, Jewish Religion, The Weight of 3,000 Years, following Laws Against Non-Jews, following Desecrating the Sabbath to Save Life. Desecrating the Sabbath, that is, doing work that would otherwise be banned on Saturday, becomes a duty when the need to save a Jew's life demands it. The problem of saving a Gentile's life on the Sabbath is not raised in the Talmud as a main issue, since it is in any case forbidden even on a weekday. It does, however, enter as a complicating factor in two connections. First, there is a problem where a group of people are in danger, and it is possible, but not certain, that there is at least one Jew among them. Should the Sabbath be desecrated in order to save them? There is an extensive discussion of such cases. Following earlier authorities, including Maimonides and the Talmud itself, the Shulchan Aruch decides these matters according to the weight of probabilities. Note: Maimonides, Sabbath 2, 2021, Shulchan Aruch, Orach Hayim, number 329, end of note. For example, suppose 9 Gentiles and 1 Jew live in the same building. One Saturday, the building collapses. One of the 10, it is not known which one, is away, but the other 9 are trapped under the rubble. Should the rubble be cleared, thus desecrating the Sabbath, seeing that the Jew may not be under it? He may have been the one that got away. The Shulchan Aruch says that it should, presumably, because the odds that the Jew is under the rubble are high, 9-1. But now suppose that 9 have got away, and only one, again, it is not known which one, is trapped. Then, there is no duty to clear the rubble, presumably because this time there are long odds, 9-1, against the Jew being the person trapped. Similarly, if a boat containing some Jews is seen to be in peril upon the sea, it is a duty incumbent upon all to desecrate the Sabbath in order to save it. However, the great Rabbi Akiva Eiger, died in 1837, comments that this applies only when it is known that there are Jews on board. But if nothing at all is known about the identity of those on board, the Sabbath must not be desecrated, for one acts according to the weight of probabilities, and the majority of people in the world are Gentiles. Note: Rabbi Akiva Eiger, commentary on Shulchan Aruch, Ibidem, here also adds that if a baby is found abandoned in a town inhabited mainly by Gentiles, a rabbi should be consulted as to whether the baby should be saved. End of note. Thus, since there are long very odds against any of the passengers being Jewish, they must be allowed to drown. Secondly, the provision that a Gentile may be saved or cared for in order to avert the danger of hostility is curtailed on the Sabbath. A Jew called upon to help a Gentile on a weekday may have to comply because to admit that he is not allowed in principle to save the life of a non-Jew would be to invite hostility. But on Saturday, the Jew can use Sabbath observance as a plausible excuse. A paradigmatic case discussed at length in the Talmud is that of a Jewish midwife invited to help a Gentile woman in childbirth. The upshot is that the midwife is allowed to help on a weekday for fear of hostility, but on the Sabbath she must not do so because she can excuse herself by saying, "We are allowed to desecrate the Sabbath only for our own, who observe the Sabbath. But for your people who do not keep the Sabbath, we are not allowed to desecrate it." Is this explanation a genuine one or merely an excuse? Maimonides clearly thinks that it is just an excuse, which can be used even if the task that the midwife is invited to do does not actually involve any desecration of the Sabbath. Presumably, the excuse will work just as well even in this case, because Gentiles are generally in the dark as to precisely which kinds of work are banned for Jews on the Sabbath. At any rate, he decrees, a Gentile woman must not be helped in childbirth on the Sabbath, even for payment, nor must one fear hostility, even when such help involves no desecration of the Sabbath. The Shulchan Aruch decrees likewise. Note, Maimonides, Sabbath 2:12, Shulchan Aruch Orach Chaim 330. The latter text says heathen rather than Gentile, but some of the commentators, such as Turei Zahav, stress that this ruling applies even to Ishmaelites, that is, to Muslims who are not idolaters. Christians are not mentioned explicitly in this connection, but the ruling must a fortiori apply to them, since, as we shall see below, Islam is regarded in a more favorable light than Christianity. See also the responsa of Khatam Sofer quoted below. End of note. Nevertheless, this sort of excuse could not always be relied upon to do the trick and avert a Gentile hostility. Therefore, certain important rabbinical authorities had to relax the rules to some extent and allow Jewish doctors to treat Gentiles on the Sabbath, even if this involved doing certain types of work normally banned on that day. This partial relaxation applied particularly to rich and powerful Gentile patients who could not be fobbed off so easily and whose hostility could be dangerous. Thus, Rabbi Yoel Sirkis, author of Bayit Hadash and one of the greatest rabbis of his time, Poland, 17th century, decided that mayors, petty nobles, and aristocrats should be treated on the Sabbath because of the fear of their hostility which involves some danger. But in other cases, especially when the Gentile can be fobbed off with an evasive excuse, a Jewish doctor would commit an unbearable sin by treating him on the Sabbath. Later, in the same century, a similar verdict was given in the French city of Metz, whose two parts were connected by a pontoon bridge. Jews are not normally allowed to cross such a bridge on the Sabbath, but the rabbi of Metz decided that a Jewish doctor may nevertheless do so if he is called to the great governor. Since the doctor is known to cross the bridge for the sake of his Jewish patients, the governor's hostility could be aroused if the doctor refused to do so for his sake. Under the authoritarian rule of Louis XIV, It was evidently important to have the goodwill of his intendant. The feeling of lesser Gentiles were of little importance. Note: these two examples from Poland and France are reported by Rabbi I.Z. Kahana, afterwards professor of Talmud in the religious Bar Ilan University in Israel, Medicine in the Halachic Post-Talmudic Literature, Sinai, Volume 27, 1950, page 221. He also reports the following case from 19th century Italy. Until 1848, a special law in the Papal States banned Jewish doctors from treating Gentiles. The Roman Republic, established in 1848, abolished this law along with all other discriminatory law against Jews. But in 1849, an expeditionary force sent by France's President Louis Napoleon, afterwards Emperor Napoleon III, defeated the Republic and restored Pope Pius IX, who in 1850 revived the anti-Jewish laws. The commanders of the French garrison, disgusted with this extreme reaction, ignored the papal law and hired some Jewish doctors to treat their soldiers. The chief rabbi of Rome, Moshe Hazan, who was himself a doctor, was asked whether a pupil of his, also a doctor, could take a job in a French military hospital despite the risk of having to desecrate the Sabbath. The rabbi replied that if the conditions of employment expressly mention work on the Sabbath, he should refuse. But if they do not, he could take the job and employ the great cleverness of God-fearing Jews. For example, he could repeat on Saturday the prescription given on Friday by simply telling this to the dispenser. Rabbi Kahana's rather frank article, which contains many other examples, is mentioned in the bibliography of a book by the former chief rabbi of Britain, Rabbi Emanuel Jacobovitz, Jewish Medical Ethics, Block, New York, 1962. But in the book itself, nothing is said on this matter. End of note.